Worth Abbey in Sussex is home to a community of 22 Benedictine monks. In the summer of 2004, they opened the doors of their cloistered world to 5 outsiders. The aim was to discover if a 1,500-year-old monastic tradition had anything to offer an increasingly apathetic and materialistic society. The 5 men lived alongside the monks for 40 days and 40 nights. It was an intense, challenging, emotional experience. But did it have any lasting effect on their lives? Now they're going back. It's nearly 18 months since the men left the monastery. Now the monks have invited them back for a weekend retreat. But the monks want it to be more than just an old boys' reunion. As ever, they have a mission.
I'm really looking forward to the guys coming this weekend because we haven't seen some of them for 15 months. I think the difficulty is going to be to recreate the atmosphere of the 40 days they spent with us during a short weekend.
Good to have you back.
What should help this, however, is that this weekend is the Feast of the Epiphany, which is the story of the 3 kings following the star. So we're going to ask them, what star have you been following since you left the monastery?
The community is also keen to catch up with its former guests. Fortunately, being a feast day, speaking at dinner is allowed.
You know where I went the other night? Home Park, to watch Plymouth Argyle, and they got hammered by Leeds 3-0.
Oh, God.
Absolutely.
Things aren't looking good, Gary, are
Well,
they?
they were looking good over Christmas. How's Brighton doing?
There were people who took likes to the various individuals, and quite a number were Anthony supporters. We liked Anthony, they said. We liked Anthony. Yeah, quite a number.
I'm a likeable person.
Absolutely.
Arriving at the monastery now holds no fear for the men. But in the summer of 2004, they were more than a little apprehensive about what monastic life might involve. The 5 men who were selected from hundreds of volunteers each had very different reasons for wanting to take part. First, Anthony Wright, a high-earning, high-energy bachelor with a lifestyle to match.
Ask me what am I expecting to find. I don't know what I'm going to find until I get there. I might get there and not like it, you know. Might get there and love it. I might want to be a monk, you never know. But doubt it. But they'd never let me in anyway.
Gary McCormick, a former Protestant paramilitary from Northern Ireland, wanted to repair the damage of years spent in prison.
Hopefully by going to the monastery and really homing in on these things of distrust, these things of fear, these things of rejection, I can really deal with it once and for all.
Non-believer Tony Burke arrived at the monastery straight from a job making trailers for a sex chat line.
If this can give me a really firm grounding and a launch pad for the next 29 years of my life, then that's a great thing.
The oldest member of the group was Peter Griffith, a retired teacher and published poet from Bristol.
I'm hoping to get some spiritual guidance, explaining the sheer mystery of existence.
Quite literally, as Monty Python put it, what's the meaning of life, you know?
The last volunteer, Nicholas Buxton, worried that his academic career had undermined his faith.
Everything is, an intellectual argument rather than just a matter of faith and practice. And there is the sense that it's taken the sort of heart out of it, and I would like to put the heart back into it.
Can I introduce Abbot Christopher, who is the superior of the community.
Right. Gary. Nice to meet you. Tony.
Tony.
Peter.
On arrival at the monastery, the men were welcomed by Abbot Christopher and informed that, like the monks, they would be expected to attend 6 church services every day. They were then shown around the very modern Abbey church. For some, it wasn't quite what they were expecting.
My first impressions were I was quite surprised because you have a mindset, don't you? You think of a monastery as crumbling, covered with ivy, with cowled figures flitting about in gloomy corridors and echoing, and crucifixes all over the place, and a bit like some sort of Hammer horror film.
What they actually found was a community of 21st century monks living according to the 5th century rule of St. Benedict and his core principles of humility, obedience, and silence.
I sometimes get groups of young children just to sit in here. And I say, can you hear it? It's called silence.
That evening, as they headed down to the first of 240 church services, each of the men embarked on a highly personal spiritual journey. Gary had spent much of his early life in prison and was overwhelmed by the new surroundings.
There's 22 monks in here, and every one of them love you and accept you. I've never been made more welcome in a place in all of my life. The acceptance here is like, to me, it's like walking into heaven.
In the gentle, forgiving atmosphere of the monastery, Gary soon began to open up about his troubled past.
I remember my mother come up to visit me, and this was the turning point in my life. I remember I asked her to bring me certain stuff up and she didn't bring me it. And I remember saying to her in the visit, just fuck off, will you? And I remember, it was the drugs that was making me do it. And I remember her walking out crying her eyes out, from the visit. And she was the only one who ever really stood by me, in my life. And there's a lot of emotions lies deep within our subconscious that we're not prepared to look at. And it's in situations like the monastery that led me to think about my deep-rooted emotions, where I had been so uncomfortable within my own skin that I took it out on other people, i.e. my mum, that day on the visit. And, I was thankful that happened that day, although it caused me a lot of pain. But it brought me to really look at the deep issues within myself and the way that I treat other people.
The men's first week in the monastery was all about settling into the monastic routine of 6 church services a day, silent meals, and manual labour. It was during the daily sessions of religious instruction that Tony first aired his typically modern scepticism about religion and faith.
The monastic tradition doesn't want to see the Bible as a book of answers. It sees it more as a book of poetry. In other words, I don't have to read a text as being an answer or a dogma.
Does that not make your life easier when there's things in the Bible that you don't necessarily agree with? You can say, but that's all down to interpretation. And that's your little kind of disclaimer at the end saying, no, we don't agree with this, but,
absolutely,
it's down to interpretation.
I could give you a very, very searing set of reasons why we should dismiss the Bible out of hand. I can give you that analytic argument at this level, right? But at my own personal level, this text feeds me in a way which never ceases to amaze me.
I probably did go in with a bit of an attitude. I guess I wanted to kind of run the show and expose it a little bit and kind of have the last laugh and get one over on it. But that soon disappeared after a week or two.
Feeling increasingly secure, Tony also began to open up about his past life and a struggle with alcohol, which had seen him hit rock bottom just 6 months before.
I found myself in a fairly dark place, entertaining some pretty dark thoughts, I suppose. I didn't want to carry on. I didn't want to physically occupy another single second or minute on the earth. I wanted somehow for the problem to be taken away. I decided to come clean about why I'd arrived at the monastery, my drink problem, because previously I'd been dishonest. But there's no point in being dishonest, and the only way to move on, the only way to progress and grow is to come clean, and especially in an environment like that where you've got nothing to fear.
Cambridge University student Nicholas Buxton was hoping that his spell at the monastery would rekindle his faith. Having spent time with Buddhist monks in India, he settled easily into the monastic routine, but became slightly less comfortable when Father Mark, his mentor, pushed him on what he actually believed.
Within the way you see things right now, is God someone or something requiring translation?
But the word, yes. If you say, do you believe in God? Well, first of all, I'll say, well, what do you mean by you, God, and believe? I can just about handle the do and in.
That's a good refuge.
And then I'll say, well, on a good day, yes.
It wasn't until some of those more personal conversations with Mark and with the abbot, who were trying to press me on things and actually try and push me a little bit, that I started to feel more challenged. But that's what it's all about. It's supposed to be challenging. I want it to be challenging. And although it might be a bit, challenging in a sort of mildly distressing sense, that's good. And I relished that.
While Nick tried to forge a more intimate relationship with God, other members of the group wrestled with strictly human concerns. As a child, Anthony Wright had been estranged from his mother, but unlike Gary and Tony, would only share his feelings with the monks.
I feel as if I spent my childhood crying all the time. I was very sad all the time. So this me, who I am, I created this person in order to get away a lot of the pain, because half of my friends wouldn't even dream, they wouldn't even know any of this. They'd be like, what? We never see that in you, because you put this complete, oh, Anthony's cool, he's sorted, he's got it all together, he's all disciplined, and yet they don't really see what's behind it all, so it's quite interesting.
As they approached the end of the second week, some members of the group, and especially Gary, were becoming increasingly frustrated by Anthony's refusal to open up to them.
I know that you can't get to know a person over a period of a couple of weeks, but I feel that I don't know much about you, Anthony, because the only thing I know is that you keep on saying all the time, like, I don't say very much. I only say something when I need to say something.
Do you know, I'm a firm believer of not speaking until I have something to say. I don't speak just for the sake of having to talk.
But I'm using this as an example. For me, I voice my opinion very much. And again, rationalising your own life and stuff like that, it can become very black and white. If it's not this, then it has to be that there. But
well, I don't see the world black and white. I see the world in a very panoramic way. Yeah, some people see it very like this. I see it like this.
But I used to see it like that.
I just don't think that I have to give you all of the information straight away. I think I drip feed you, basically, so you can, if I give you all of this information at once, then I'm giving you too much information. I will gradually drip feed you and give you the information, so when I make that picture very clear for you, you get that full picture, you can understand what I'm talking about. Is it my problem that somebody else felt that I didn't open up so quickly? Is it my problem? Because for someone to say he didn't open up, he didn't do this, he didn't, that sounds to me like it's their problem, not mine. I felt, certain individuals felt slightly threatened by me. The fact that they couldn't control the situation when it came to me. And I think that is the real issue.
Having come clean about his problems, Tony was determined to make the most of his time at the monastery and threw himself into every aspect of monastic life, including the spiritual, though it didn't always come easy.
I really want to get this.
God's sake, I was sat in church tonight and I was screaming in my head, really shouting at God. I was like, let me know that you're fucking there, if you are. Nothing.
Tony worked hard to engage with what was on offer. But Peter, who'd rejected organised religion in his youth, was slightly less receptive.
You are a literary person. You describe yourself as a poet. And that's very real. And I suppose my concern would be to invite you to move beyond the texts as literature, to see the text as saying something very real to your inner world.
But I don't think my objection to it is literary. I'm just asking myself all the time, is this really relevant to us now? I don't think that human understanding is at all helped by dogma, by doctrine and all the rest of it. I cannot accept any religion which claims to know the answer. Plainly, to me, that is nonsense. Or to put it in more succinctly, it's bullshit.
But there's more to monastic life than believing what's in the Bible. Anthony and Gary were learning just how challenging it is to live as part of a community. Tensions finally boiled over when Gary questioned Anthony's ability to interpret the Bible without having read it.
But Andy, sometimes I find that you come across as if I'm stupid.
Hold on a second, you're actually discussing something with me which started off with you saying, how can you have an opinion of something unless you've actually researched it already?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, actually you can.
Well, I don't think you can.
Well, then that's what you think, and that's what I think.
Perhaps,
I think the difficulty here is that I'm not supposed to have an opinion.
No,
but I do have an opinion.
No, of course.
Like you have an
of
opinion.
course you're supposed to have an opinion.
And if you're having a conversation with
but
me,
if
then
you're
it shouldn't
coming
get
across,
heated.
listen,
the conversation.
I'm not getting. You're the one who's getting heated. If you're
no,
across,
you didn't just walk out. I'm sorry.
Of course it'd be better if I walk out instead of getting heated.
Why? There was nothing to get
Because
heated
you're
about.
coming across Mr. Higher Mighty.
No, but I'm not. No, but I'm not.
Yes, you are.
All the time. Oh,
of course you are,
Listen to
Anthony.
yourself.
How many people have you fell out with since you've been here?
Who exactly?
You fell out with Tony. No, you fell out with me.
That's 2.
Yeah.
5. Go on. It's
Yeah.
not a very good ratio, is it?
Well, I think it's not a bad ratio.
Okay.
Far from being shocked by Anthony and Gary's confrontation, the monks recognised it as an integral part of monastic life.
The most difficult thing is trying to live in a community of guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the most difficult thing. They either don't like you sometimes, they disapprove of what you're doing, how you look, how you're dressed, how you walk, what you think, what you say. And somehow we've got to find it in our way to love our brothers.
Anthony and myself's conflict and the monastic way of life, it went hand in hand, because I'm sure that out of them 25 monks that lived together, not every one of them got on with one another. They're bound to have to face conflict at one time or another.
Give praise to the Father Almighty, to His Son Jesus Christ the Lord.
While some of the men struggled with the intensity of the monastic experience, Nick cruised through the weeks, enjoying the routine, but apparently still unable to get off the theological fence. But in the 4th week of their stay, the men were invited to visit Parkminster, a Carthusian monastery where they live as virtual hermits. The monks here spent 18 hours a day alone in their cells, working, studying and praying, in silence. They only come out to go to church.
We get up at midnight, and then midnight to about 3 o'clock, 3:30. So you've about a 3-hour stent in the middle of the night, and then Mass in the morning, and then Vespers in the evening.
You do it from midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yes. It's a great time to be up.
Great time to sleep.
No, in fact, that's very, very traditional. Those night hours, they're really wonderful times for prayer.
The effect on Nick was immediate and profound.
I was stunned by what I saw and felt there, because what I saw was the religious vocation taken to its extreme.
Thank you, Father. It's been a great privilege. I'm absolutely awestruck.
I suppose it was just the clarity, just seeing it clearly, which hit me between the eyes, and it's like, come on, you know what really matters, and you've got to turn it around and point yourself in the right direction.
At one stage on his spiritual search, Nick had flirted with the idea of becoming a priest. Back at Worth, in the wake of his visit to the hermits of Parkminster, he was asking himself some serious questions.
I feel, once again, this sense of vocation to the priesthood. I don't even like saying the word. It makes me very uncomfortable because... And yet I can't deny the fact of the feeling. What I have to determine, therefore, is whether that feeling is genuine.
Nick's visit to Parkminster made him doubt his complex approach to faith, but Tony's questions to his spiritual guide, Brother Francis, were always straightforward.
How does God speak to you?
I think he speaks to me through experience, through other people, and I think he speaks to me in the early hours of the stillness of the morning. I think you have to seek him out. And I do really feel that there's a God somewhere inside, all of us.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just expecting a little bit too much, I suppose.
God had apparently been occupying Peter's thoughts as well, and the monks were slightly bemused when he made an unexpected announcement.
Well, I won't prevaricate anymore when asked, "Are you a Christian?" in that sort of challenging way. I'll probably say I'm trying to be, which is the truth. And do you believe in God? My answer is going to be a plain and honest yes. My remark at that time may very well have been an attempt, a rather sly, I'm the guest in this house, so, I want to say thank you very much to the host.
Maybe manners made Peter want to confess his faith to the group too.
Well, my realisation is that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I have no doubt on that now, which I did have when I came in. While I was in the monastery, I came to realise that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, or could be the Son of God, but I don't think it's... You see, I don't think that's the important thing. Nor in itself is that important that I think that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. If he is, what's it got to do with me? It's whether I regard him as the Son of God as an absolute tenet of Christian belief. Is it? I doubt it.
But it wasn't their relationship with God that Anthony and Gary were concentrating on. Tensions between them had been simmering for some time, before finally coming to a head early in the 5th week. In an attempt to clear the air, Gary requested a group meeting, but unwisely without telling Anthony what was on the agenda.
All these things have already happened, and it's why I don't want to go there with it. I'm quite happy just to let it lie in my head, let 11 days go, and me just get off this planet, out of it.
Why are you avoiding the issue?
Gary, I just really don't want to talk to you anymore. Simple as that, really.
I don't really want to talk to you, but
well,
I'm making an effort to do it.
There we go. We're both happy.
Because you...
No, neither of you are
Listen,
happy.
no, I'm not happy. Because I'll tell you the reason why...
Do you see, here we go again?
No, how long? Don't raise your voice, mate.
Yeah, well, don't talk at me then.
Well, then look at me when I'm talking to you.
Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to you.
Fuck off, man. What is wrong with you? I'm not a kid, you know. I'm not a fucking kid, Gary. I'm not a fucking kid. No, I'm not listening to you. No. You know, I came on this journey to find me, not to sit there playing games with people. And sorry, I saw that as a game. I didn't see it as anything more than self-gratifying for individuals. And for me, it was the weak individuals.
Next day, an unrepentant Gary was summoned by the abbot.
It would seem from what's been reported to me that by any normal standards, the way that you and Anthony behaved towards each other was not acceptable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Part of what I think is he doesn't like my honesty, because I'm a rough and ready person and very honest and open. And he doesn't know how to handle that.
But what I'm saying to you, Gary, is he does not interpret your directness as being a good thing. And so in your dealings with the other people, and this is straight out of Benedict's rule, there has to be this constant adapting to the personality of the other person. And I think that for you is the big challenge. I think the challenge for Anthony is, as you're saying, to be more open. But you can't use your personality to force that out of him. You just can't.
I had to realise that not everybody's like me. And that was a big learning process for my own life, that Anthony wasn't like me, that he had his own way of dealing with stuff, and I had my way. So I had to learn to respect his way, to deal with his issues. Thank you, Lord, for making me so wonderfully. Within a monastic way of living, the big word in there is forgiveness. Lord, I ask that you would transform me into a new person. And so for my conflict with Anthony, I remember in my room asking God to help me to forgive him. And I remember I got the breakthrough of being able to forgive him.
With less than a week remaining, Father James was keen to help Anthony explore the reasons behind his recurring clashes.
Is there something that people are seeing in you that they are taking a dislike to, that one could explain in rational terms?
Well, I hear where you're going, James, but...
Do you know, we've met three times.
It's very, very interesting to think that, you know, sometimes you try and make people like you, and you don't know how to make them like you. So you create a person hoping that people will like that person, and then there's always someone who doesn't like that person. So you try and change again. But you know, how many times are you supposed to change for somebody to like you, to the point of where you're just going, well, hold on, why don't I just be myself?
Absolutely. Salvation.
Right?
Salvation.
Right? And then when you start being yourself, people like you. But sometimes it's not always easy to be yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's not always easy to be yourself because people always want something else. So, you know, when do you ever win? When do you ever win? With James, I remember him saying to me, look in the mirror, because if you can like the person, the reflection that you're seeing, then it's easier to like everybody else. And that's looking into your soul, isn't it? At first, when I used to look in the mirror, I used to not really like, woo, you know. But the more I can stare into that mirror now and I like who I see. And that's something I got from the monastery.
The two people with the most deprived and wounded upbringings have collided in the last 24 hours. And I think that could well be the first time that each of them's got into this kind of a rage and learnt to modify their own behaviour and their own coping in a way that's made them bigger people.
Anthony, put a wee bit over the soil, mate, and then I can sort of dig it up a bit.
I'd like to think that somehow that's something to do with the monastic framework. So I'm feeling a little bit sort of encouraged, hardly dare to think that maybe this is going to hold and go deep and long, but I think it will.
While Gary and Anthony had both taken an important step forward, Tony was becoming increasingly anxious at the prospect of leaving the monastery. He was worried that what he'd learned might not be enough to sustain him in his new life without alcohol. During their final session together, he asked Brother Francis for help.
I want to give you this stone, this white stone. I think for several reasons, I think. We've got our Christian name, we've got our family name, but we've got another name, and it's called our white stone name. And that comes from the book of Revelations, where the angel says that your name is written on a white stone in heaven. And I think our vocation is to find out what that name is. And I think that's a lifelong quest. But you could keep this in your pocket.
Yeah.
And you could just hold that when it gets tough. But also remember the story that you're trying to work out, well, what's my white name? What am I really meant to be doing? Who am I really meant to be? And I don't think you'll go far wrong.
Cheers.
I hope that'll help with that.
Well, I hope it does as well. I mean, just sitting here now, I do really feel quite confused by this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And it is easy to kind of verbalise things, or just verbalise anything for the sake of wrapping it up in words, but, you know.
I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't bother. I think it's a big mystery, and we'd make a mistake to try and explain it away.
Yep. I feel quite odd.
I had a very profound spiritual experience with Francis in that room. I was touched by something which was outside of me and beyond me. Whether that be a thing or a person or an idea or an entity, whatever you want to call it, and I don't really want to call it anything. It was just an energy which I experienced. And at that point I changed, and at that point I became something new.
Into your hands, Lord, I commend my spirit.
I took something away, which still doesn't make any sense, but that I know exists. And that's what Worth gave me. It gave me a reason to go back out, almost physically go back out from the monastery and get on with life.
Charles was a bit of a natural, eh?
At the end of the 6 weeks, the 5 men said their farewells and headed home. But did the experience have any lasting effect on them? Or on the monastery? The monks have always been convinced that what Benedict wrote 1,500 years ago has something to say to the modern world. What they hadn't predicted was that when the series went out, it would evoke such a positive response from quite so many people.
Within the first 24 hours, 6,000 people visited our website after the first programme was transmitted. And that obviously really was just an extraordinary experience for us. I think 6,000 people were all of a sudden interested in what we were doing. We had people saying that it led them back to praying again for the first time in 10 years, led them back to church for the first time since they were children, and in the case of some people, it actually led to them persevering in joining their local church and becoming baptized. So this was an amazing response to a degree that we really hadn't anticipated.
It's done a lot of good to a huge number of people, and I think selfishly it's done a lot for us.
Yeah. The impact that I sense is one of being really encouraged to go on doing what we're doing and living out what we're doing with a renewed conviction that there is something of value in our way of life.
I think this has been probably the most important, the most moving experience that this community has has ever had. And it's an experience which is not static, it's fluid, it's moving on. We don't know where it's going to go, but if we're faithful to what we do and don't get led astray at all, it can only be a huge force for good.
It's Friday evening, and as the men begin their weekend back at Worth, the monks are hoping it'll be another positive experience in every way.
There's an Anglican monastery not far from here.
Yeah, down in Crawley Down, about 3 miles from here.
Do you ever meet for a fight at dinner time or anything? Like if Protestants and Catholics go used to do in Northern Ireland?
Really?
So I'm just thinking, the Catholic monks fight the Protestant monks?
No, that wouldn't go down too well at all, Gary, would it?
Since the programmes were transmitted, all the men, except Peter, have returned to the monastery at least once. Of the 5, Tony has been back most often. He values the monks' advice, and his monthly visits have become a key part of his life.
You're the person most people would remember.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, yeah, but I mean, obviously there has been some recognition, but it's all been good. I mean, it's not just people kind of shouting at you in the street, although that did happen once in Blackheath. Where some bloke just shouted from a car, "Oi!" Oi! No, he said, "Oi, monk."
After his experience at the monastery, Tony quit his job in soft porn and went back to advertising. But what has been the impact on the rest of his life?
The 6 weeks at the monastery was completely life-changing. I have become something very, very different and something much better. My newfound faith, my newfound spirituality and my view of life has kept me sober and has kept me sane. I think that's what that moment in that room gave me. It just gave me hope, and it gave me a future, and it gave me my life back.
Tony's top priority since leaving the monastery has been and continues to be staying sober. But it's not been easy.
If I hadn't gone to Worth, I probably would have relapsed. So if I'm tempted to have a drink, I think of Worth and I think of Francis and I think of that moment in that room, and you realise that there's too much to give up. I think I've matured as a man, and the monastery helped me with that. So that's one great, huge impact that the monastery's had on my life and my outlook, definitely.
Has everyone got everything they need? Yes, they have.
After dinner, the men are shown back to their old rooms.
I liked it in the article in the Students' magazine where it said I gave up soft porn because I was finding it hard to swallow.
Once they've unpacked, Abbot Christopher outlines his objectives for the weekend.
Everybody knows that Epiphany is the story of the 3 wise men and finding the baby Jesus in the stable. And so I suppose, for me, this is a wonderful weekend, as is so much the case with this whole project. There was a wonderful provenance about this, because it's about revelation, it's about journey, and it's about vocation. I think what the really important question is, what star have you been following for the last 15 months?
Since leaving the monastery, Anthony's star has led him to make changes to his personal and professional life.
I feel the experience at Worth has made me a more rounded person. I'm far more forgiving. I'm far more in tune with other people's needs. My relationship with my mother is better. My relationship with the world on a whole is better. And it was also very interesting to see that everybody else had problems and that you're not the only one who has problems, and that a problem shared is a problem dealt with. It was a good experience to, start you off on your spiritual journey. There was bad, but, with every bad comes good.
But the most significant change Anthony made was deciding to give up his lucrative job in a legal publishing company.
I went back to work and it was just noise. It was just noise, and all that tension rose again.
And I just wanted to pursue my goals, go for my vocation, you know, and from thinking it wasn't possible, I actually realised coming out of the monastery it was possible, that all I had to do was believe and have faith in it.
Anthony set himself up as a producer in the music business.
I started composing and producing and stuff. And I'm pleased because for once I'm happy doing what I want to do. I'm moving in the right direction, definitely.
All 5 men were expected to stay at the monastery for the entire weekend, but Anthony got his coat.
Just explain what's going on now, what you're doing.
What's going on? Well, I'm heading off home because I've got some work to finish, which I did when I was asked to come back. I did say that I was not possibly going to be able to stay. So I'm going to go off quickly, do some work, and then I'm going to come back early in the morning. So I'm very much going to be part of it, but I'm slightly going to be, you know, finishing off some international work that needs doing, so...
Perhaps conveniently, Anthony's international work commitments also save him from spending any personal time with the rest of the group.
The community for me was the 4 of us.
Yeah.
And Anthony was always slightly on the outside because he put himself there.
Outside, yeah. And I think if anything, he's more guarded now, but then that's obviously understandable.
But he's obviously he's made adjustments to his life, and he's doing his own things, following his path. And I had a chat with him earlier, and it sounds like, you know, he has stepped out of his comfort zone, and he's gone out there and done some things that under normal circumstances he wouldn't necessarily have done. And I think his experience here has given him that, or contributed to that. So
definitely.
He certainly gained from the experience.
Yeah, definitely.
There aren't any losers from it. It's just a shame he can't, you know, bring his toothbrush and stick a pair of pants in a bag and stay the night. Just...
With Anthony arriving back just in time for church, the men settle once again into the monastic rhythm. Of the 5 men, Gary's had by far the most eventful 18 months. When he first arrived at Worth, he was living in Cornwall and working as a painter and decorator. As a result of the monastery, he and his life have changed dramatically.
The monastery definitely did do what I went there to achieve. To get that 6 weeks out of life, just to find stillness and quietness, to be able to just look at your life and where it's come from and where it's heading, is a fantastic thing for anybody, I think. Obviously, I went there to try and find a new direction for life, and I've had fantastic opportunities to go around different parts of the UK, speaking to people about my past life.
Yes, sir. Gary McCormick. Right, I think you're going to visit in the chapel.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You got some idea with you, sir?
Yeah. And one of the places I like the best is to be able to talk in the prison. Just to be asked to go in and share your life's experiences with people that have no hope, that perhaps don't know that there is any hope. And to be able to go in and bring them that hope, because I've found hope myself, is a real joy.
I'd heard that Jesus Christ died for me upon a cross. But what does he want to save me for? I was only scum of the earth. It's how we think about ourselves what makes a difference. See, the Word of God says this here, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I might not always look it, I might not always act it, but God is not always on the performance. He looks at the heart. If it was on performance, I wouldn't be standing here tonight, I can assure you that. If it was on performance, I certainly wouldn't have never got to the monastery or anything. God sees the heart. He knows how you're thinking. He knows every one of your hearts. He knows every pain that you've been through. And the reason why I come here is to bring a message of hope, is to bring a message of encouragement to every man sitting in them seats there tonight. Because I've been sitting there myself and I've thought, I'm never going to make nothing of life. But God has a different plan and a purpose for each and every one of us.
But back at the retreat, Gary admits he's struggling. As a result of his prison talks, he was offered a job with a charity in Bristol. But leaving his friends and work in Cornwall to live alone in a big city with very little money has proved enormously challenging.
I think it's just the whole aspect of moving to Bristol and being unsure about my job there, being unsure about the move. And, you know, each day I'm trying to seek whether it's the right thing or whether it's not the right thing. That's more on my mind, more so than being here at the monastery.
Appropriately, considering Gary's state of mind, Abbot Christopher kicks off the first group discussion by raising the question of vocation and asking what it is we want out of life.
I put the question, are we not all seeking the same thing, really, deep down, which is peace of mind inside, to be happy in what you're thinking, to be comfortable with yourself and not to...
I agree with what Anthony says, but I'm seeking for my life to be right with the Lord Jesus Christ. And I don't always get to that point. But I want to get to that point because that's where I'm coming from in my personal experience. So that would be my destination. And through that would come peace.
To take up Gary's theme, the peace that Christ offers, he specifically said, "My peace I offer you, not as the world offers it. I offer you my peace." And the peace of Christ is in St. Paul, is called the peace which passes all human understanding.
Is it a peace through suffering rather than just trying to escape suffering?
Yes, it is.
It's the opposite of comfort.
Yeah, it's the opposite of comfort.
Yeah.
Which is the peace that Gary will arrive at.
That's right.
Because he's taken a risk and he's left his comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly no tranquility in it. It's a good way to explain it, really, isn't it? You know, the peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
Because in your own understanding, as a human being, we would all like to do stuff that's nice and comfortable, but only with anything that's difficult at times pushes out to take you past the comfort zone.
But you know you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You have the peace of mind of knowing you're doing the right thing, but it's not very tranquil or comfortable.
No.
And it makes you grow as well.
For Tony, Gary's selfless determination to put his faith into practice is something of a revelation.
There's me kind of thinking, yeah, I'm being reasonably good and I'm walking the path and towing the line. Yeah, but I'm living within a real little kind of comfort zone, you know. Whereas you made the ultimate sacrifice, which is give up everything you know and fuck off somewhere completely new, where you don't know anybody, no money, you don't know what the future holds, but you're prepared to do that.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of courage, and it takes more courage than I think I've got, because if someone decided to rip me out of my comfort zone at the moment and put me somewhere else, I don't know if I could do it. To go and, you know, for the good of other people, to go and work with prisoners in a prison, you know.
But Gary isn't the only one who discovered his true vocation at the monastery. Prior to his 40 days at Worth, Nick had spent years grappling with the question of what to do with his life.
Since leaving Worth, I've sort of stuck my hand up regarding the priesthood in the Church of England. And I'm going through the selection process at the moment. In the early 6th century, when Benedict wrote his rule for monasteries, monks and nuns were essentially ordinary lay people. The outcome of that is either, yes, this candidate is recommended for training, or no, this candidate is not recommended for training at this stage. We discover that he claims obedience is the way to true freedom. I feel very positive, I'm excited, and we'll see what happens. If it's a no, I expect I'll be disappointed and relieved, and if it's a yes, I expect I'll be overjoyed and terrified. So, either way, I'm happy, I think.
While Nick has finally decided how best to express his faith, Tony hasn't. One of the reasons he returns to Worth so regularly is that he hasn't found another church where he feels comfortable.
I've been to a few churches around town and they just annoy the shit out of me because they're so fake, and the people look so lost and the people on the stage just look so plastic and so charming and so seductive. And I just think, I don't believe in these people. these people are not an expression of faith. So I'd much rather just slip into a church and sit there for 10 minutes and have a bit of quiet time, or pray at home. I don't feel that you necessarily have to turn up at a certain place at a certain time, dress in a certain way to express your faith and live out your faith. I think there's other ways of doing it.
Absolutely.
Tony's worried that the reason he doesn't feel comfortable at church is because he doesn't really belong there. That evening, he seeks advice from his spiritual guide, Brother Francis.
Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, who are you trying to kid? You're not this kind of respectable cornerstone of your community. Maybe not cornerstone, but you know, you belong in the pub, getting pissed and pissing people off, and shortening your life whilst doing it. And you could argue that that's true.
You could also argue that it's not true, and that is not the true you. We've seen a glimpse of the true you. And, you know, blessed are the cracked, for they let the light in. And, you know, and you've been cracked open here, and the light is shining through. So how are you going to nourish that life?
How am I going to, what, from a
spiritual perspective, how are you going to feed that?
As far as religion's concerned, as far as my spiritual life is concerned.
Is there a difference?
Well, that takes me on to a kind of a slightly different subject, which is I'm not sharing it with anybody, and the only time I share it is when I come back here. Sometimes people say that you should be somewhere on Sunday at 10 o'clock every week. And sometimes I say, well, why don't you bugger off and mind your own business and just let me get on with the day-to-day running of my life, which I obviously find difficult enough as it is already.
But Jesus wasn't in church every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock.
No.
He was out there.
Hadn't built any.
with the people.
Yeah.
Walking alongside them.
Yeah.
In their suffering. In their suffering. It's being present. You know, he was right there in those physical situations with people, with tax collectors, prostitutes. He was there, walking alongside them, being present. And that for me is really, really important. Really, really important.
At Worth, Sunday morning means an extra hour in bed and a public mass in the church. Afterwards, the men gather for their final session together. Inevitably, the conversation returns to the question of vocation and what to do next.
For me, the sharpness of the vocation question is it has to be, in some sense, cashed into an action. Because after the 40 days in the desert and the temptations, Jesus goes out and starts doing things. Now, if we accept the convention that he was aged round about 30 when he did this, then the previous part of his life had been rather quiet. And at the point of baptism and the discovery of his vocation, it becomes very active. I mean, there's a sense of urgency. Huge sense of urgency about it. That's why I think it is a slightly sharper question than the question of what journey are you on? The question, what vocation do you have? Gary, how did you distinguish, do you think, that you should go to Bristol as being, in some sense, a vocation from God rather than just what you fancied doing? I mean, that's quite a difficult distinction to make.
The circumstances were that I went to Bulgaria to do the aid work, to give out of myself, not to receive anything back. And when I came back, I was made unemployed by the job that I was doing. So the door opened to be able to go to Bristol. And I think that since I've went there, you know, there's a lot of sacrifices that I've had to make, personal sacrifices. But it started a work towards the vocation of doing prison work, working with people that I can identify with, which I've been there myself. And so
What's really interesting there is that following the vocation will come usually in response to something having been given for free, if you like.
Yeah.
For me, when you talk about doing things for other people, I write, I produce, I create something that other people can enjoy, that other people can identify, that they can see something in it that will hopefully do something for them.
Yes.
I knew my vocation well before I came to the monastery, and that is to write poetry. You know, I started writing when I was 15, and it was a question of having to.
Yeah.
But it does pale into insignificance. Poetry or music or whatever, I just don't buy that it's a completely selfless act. It's not a completely... It is, Peter, it's not a completely selfless act.
No, Tony's right, he's absolutely right. You know, it's doing something for the self. But when you get to a certain position...
Anything wrong with that?
No.
I think your vocation and your service is a 100% selfless act. And that's what Gary's doing. And we can all learn from that.
Yeah.
But it interests me that you talk about urgency. And that maybe those decisions need to be made and those choices need to be made sooner rather than later before you waste any more time. And I think that's possibly what you were hinting at with sort of like Jesus not doing anything up to his when he was 30.
When do you turn 30, Tim?
I did. I turned 30 in March.
So this is the moment.
Yeah. Just because he did it doesn't mean I have to do it. We all mature at different rates. I think the weekend has served as a major kick up the arse, really. It's woken me up a bit. It's made me realise the truth behind vocation is to go out there and take a risk and remove yourself from your comfort zone and do something which benefits other people. It's an unconditional giving. You know, I'd certainly like to do something in a volunteer capacity, and I think I can live out aspects of the rule in that way. And Francis gave me a lot of reassurance last night and a lot of encouragement with that. And kind of I went to bed happy, I think.
The weekend is nearly over, and it's almost time for the men to return home. All remain convinced that their monastic journey has been well worth taking. But how does the abbot assess their progress?
The whole experience has been a really encouraging one for us as monks. But this weekend has highlighted how difficult it is for individuals to live out these monastic insights in today's world without a community framework. But what's really important is that the journey that they began during their 40 days with us is still continuing. And that's about as much, I think, as one can hope for, that they've started a journey which they've not given up on.
Four modern women take time out to begin their journey of self-discovery. Join them at the convent, a new series for BBC Two next Wednesday at 9.